I'm being completely honest with you, that is heinous to me. Can I make it for less? The answer is
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode today. I am doing a second episode in my new series that I guess I'm kind of calling, Can I Actually Make It for Less? So the last episode that I had done, and the first one of this series, was a deep dive into the brand Free People and their knitwear collections. So today, by popular demand, we're going to be looking into the brand Sezane. So get comfy, grab your knitting, and let's go ahead and dive on in. Sezane was founded in 2013, taking its name from founder Morgane Sezaloghi's first and last names, and it was actually the first French brand born entirely online. Before launching Sezane, Morgane ran an eBay shop, and there she would actually sell a carefully curated collection of vintage goods, oftentimes with her own personal little DIY touches. As demand grew, she began to fill out these vintage collections with more and more of her own designs, which we now know as Sezane. Today, the brand has a focus on fairly priced quality items, and it achieves this by releasing 4 seasonal drops to accompany their permanent collection, Les Essentiels. There's no overproduction, there's no conventional sales, and there's also no unsold stock. They're also still a mostly online brand with just a few pop-ups in major cities. I would definitely say that the Sezane style can be described as classic, timeless, Parisian chic, and their classic styles, shapes, and colors are what make this brand kind of ironically scream quiet luxury and what make it so appealing to women of all ages. Now, with a few exceptions, the Sezane knitwear typically ranges from $100 to $170 just for a sweater, and their size range includes sizes extra small up through triple XL. The brand's commitment to sustainability and quality is made abundantly clear with just a quick scroll through their site. Each item actually includes a detailed history of where the materials came from, which also includes the care instructions, and albeit they're kind of hard to come by, they have their appartements, which offer alterations and repairs, often for little to no money. So in a fashion world run by easy to care for synthetic materials, that kind of extra hand holding is, I'm sure, what makes a lot of young adults feel confident to invest in one of Sezane's pieces. For most people, it could be daunting to purchase garments that are made out of mostly natural fibers like wool, alpaca, and mohair. Even if Sezane, the brand, does typically combine those things with more synthetic materials like recycled polyamides and elastanes. Regardless, I think any knitter would be really pleased to see that the majority content of these pieces are actually natural fibers that follow the responsible wool, alpaca, and mohair standard and are often Oikotex certified. Now, I just love what founder Morgane Sezaloghi has to say about not wanting to define the brand's aesthetic. She says, "What I love is just to always remind myself how many personalities every woman can actually have." And honestly, I felt so seen with this quote. I think it's clear when you look at the website that these pieces are meant to be both timeless and interesting, and they aren't meant to fit just one standard. However, the overarching theme is that quality and just classic chic style. So with all of that, you know, as a knitter, I have that eye where I look at something and say, I think I could make that. And oftentimes I think maybe better, maybe for less. And the point of this series is to find out if that's true. So today we're going to deep dive into a few of their different collections and see if we really can kind of dupe these items for less. And then as we move on towards the end of the video, I did also just pull some patterns that I thought kind of embodied the SÉZANE vibe, if you will. So let's go ahead and get started with their signature collection. First up here, we're going to be talking about the Gaspard cardigan, which comes in at $120. And before we talk about anything else, just because I think it's so interesting with this brand, let's look at the content of this cardigan. So the main fabric, it says, is 37% super kid mohair, 37% baby alpaca, 26% polyamide, of which 22% of recycled polyamide. And this garment is made in Italy. So that's just so fun to kind of see in a mainstream, quote unquote, mainstream brand. I definitely do think that at least here in the US, this brand is a little bit trickier to get your hands on. But like I said earlier, they do have these pop-up locations. There are appartements in some major cities. So if you're near one of those, I would say go check it out. I know I would love to at some point. But anyway, this Gaspard cardigan is really classic, simple, basic sweater, and it actually is reversible. So you could choose to wear this one with the buttons down the front, or you could flip it around so that those buttons are actually on the back. As far as the overall look of this garment, it's definitely very classic, kind of simple details. Even things like the button band, they're just kind of narrow continuations of the ribbing that makes up the whole body of the cardigan. And looking at this, you can also see that the drop shoulder kind of leads into these more narrow, slender arms, whereas the rest of this cardigan is just a little bit kind of boxy and oversized. Nothing major though, and it's definitely one of those pieces that you could work so seamlessly into your wardrobe at any age, any profession, any stage of life, anytime. This is such a classic that I would definitely consider worth being an investment piece in your wardrobe. On the website, it does come in quite a few different colors. I love the red, of course. And here in the gray, you can see how it looks with those buttons on the back, which just kind of adds a little extra bang for your buck when you're talking about an investment piece like this one. So it comes in red, black, sage, light beige, ecru, rosewood, vintage blue, perfect green, navy, burgundy, ecru, gold, camel, azure blue. Oh my gosh, it keeps going. Pastel yellow. Comes in so many different colors, and honestly, it's one of those things that I bet a lot of people purchase this and then wind up purchasing it again in different colors. So with that $120 price tag and the style of this sweater, I thought we could probably try and make it for less. Maybe, we'll see. The first option that I've pulled up to try and dupe this sweater is probably the most similar to what I could find on Ravelry, and that's going to be the Cardi Jumper by Vert Knit. With one look at this Ravelry page, you can already see that this is also intended to be knit to be worn reversibly, so you could wear it with the buttons on the front, or you could just flip it around and have those buttons on the back, and from the front it looks like a plain sweater. Very similar to the Gaspard cardigan. It has a little bit of a boxier body to it with slightly more narrow sleeves, and though this one is not ribbed, the proportion of the details here, like that kind of more narrow button band, it does sort of match up to me. I've seen so many people talk about this cardigan in particular, and if I'm not mistaken, I also believe that the designer has gone through and revised this pattern to make it fit as best as she can. And it's honestly something that I would go ahead and put on my queue, just because I don't have anything in my knitted wardrobe that's quite this basic and therefore wearable. She knit hers up in a sport weight yarn, it says on Ravelry, which she did by holding light fingering with a soft silk mohair. And so we will come back to that in just a little bit, but I wanted to show you first the other option that I had pulled to maybe replicate something similar to the Gaspard cardigan, and that is this Winter Pyramid Cloud by Minimi Knit Design. Very similar from afar, but it does just have a few more interesting details to it that the Sezane cardigan doesn't exactly have. However, it is also reversible, so I thought that that was interesting. So this top actually features this interesting, I mean, it's called the pyramid, the winter pyramid, right? So it has this interesting direction change in the way that the knit stitches go. And then you also are looking at what I believe is the reverse stockinette of the fabric on the main body of this cardigan. However, the proportions, like I said, are very similar again, where you have a little bit of a snug sleeve, although they are just a little bit more baggy than the last one here. And then the body overall is a little bit boxy, soft, kind of rounded collar. I think either way, you could get a very similar look to the Sezane cardigan. However, for me, the one that was looking the most similar would definitely be the one from Vert Knit. And so I would love to see if we could actually knit this cardigan for less. I went with the obvious choice for this option, which was going to be the Knitting for Olive merino held with their soft silk mohair. It's one of the suggested yarns for this pattern, but also the color selection kind of mirrors that of the Gaspard cardigan itself. There's so many options for colors, so you could definitely find something to match any one of those colors that Sezane offers. I definitely love the idea of kind of mimicking that red cardigan and going with something like the blood orange merino. Now, this is 100% merino wool, and each ball is a 50-gram ball for $7.60. And of course, you would also have to consider holding that with the soft silk mohair, which they also have in the blood orange color. And this 25-gram ball comes in at about $9. And this yarn is composed of 70% mohair, 30% silk. So I also think it's worth noting that this combination of yarns does kind of bring you into the realm of the composition of the Gaspard cardigan, in that it also has the mohair. We're swapping out baby alpaca for some merino, and then we are avoiding all synthetic materials in this option if we were to knit it ourselves. So that's always just worth noting. So in this case, we have a sweater that comes in 16 sizes, which means that the average size is a size 8. And for that size, you would need about 7 balls of the merino plus 7 balls of the mohair, which means that the yarn cost for this garment would be about $116.20 to make that size 8. And comparing that to the $120 price tag of the Gaspard cardigan, it does seem like you could knit this for less. Now, a quick pause, because I'm going to mention the fact that I'm not considering the pattern prices in this context, just because I'm really looking at whether or not you could use similar or better materials to get the same finished object. And so assuming this pattern could be in your library or already, or something that you would use over and over again, it just feels like, for me, it makes the most sense in this context to not mention the pattern price. The other thing is that in the Free People version of this video that I had done, I had a few comments where people were saying that when they knit something, they actually factor in their time and what they should be paid for that time. So I guess if it took me 40 hours to knit a cardigan and I wanted to pay myself at minimum wage, I should factor that into the end all cost of that garment. And if I'm being completely honest with you, that is heinous to me. If that's what you choose to do when you're making something, then you do you. We all have our different quirks. But for me, I just enjoy knitting, and I also enjoy the pride I feel when I've made a garment versus purchased one. So I don't care if it takes me 2 hours, 20 weeks, 20 years. I would rather just make it, and I would never consider what I should be paid for making it, because no one's asking me to make it. I'm making it for myself. So just in case that conversation comes up again, I got to be honest and say, like, in no world would I ever consider that, but you do you. So in this case, comparing the Gaspard cardigan to the Vert Knit Cardi Jumper, I do think you could make it for about the same price or a little less. Next up from Sezane, we have another one of their signatures, and this one caught my eye right away. Also similar to some of the Free People sweaters we had seen, but this is the Elly Cardigan, and it is $170. Again, this one is 55% alpaca, 30% polyamide, 15% wool, of which 22% of recycled polyamide. And this one was made in Italy. I think that this cardigan just looks like the coziest, perfect fall cardigan. This is also probably one that I had seen more than any other Sezane piece in just my social media spheres. I've seen people actually wearing this cardigan, and I've heard really wonderful reviews about it and the softness and the squishiness of it, so that's good to know as well. But it's this really lovely brioche looking chunky texture cardigan, has fun balloon sleeves where the sleeve kind of bubbles up at the bottom, and then there's a little bit more of a cinched and tall ribbing. I love the rounded collar on this one, which I think is so cute. You could either just button up the top couple of buttons and leave the bottom open, or you could button the whole thing or just halfway. So I think that that's a really fun and versatile style that we hadn't seen for a little while there. It was all just V-neck cardigans, right? Again, it comes in a few different colors, but I gotta be honest, I'm just loving this pink one. And overall, the vibe is just chunky, oversized, cozy, comfy. And it also has a clean button placket, which really beautifully, I think, contrasts the chunky brioche and everything. And even that collar is done in the rib. So imagine my surprise when I come across this pattern on Ravelry. And honestly, I don't think we could get more on the nose than this as a dupe. So I found the Daydreamer Cardigan by Veronica Lindbergh, which may or may not have been directly inspired by the Sezane cardigan, because look at this thing. It is cozy, oversized, brioche, ribbed collar, clean button band, little balloon sleeves. I don't know, you guys, this is pretty dead on if you ask me. And I just absolutely love the way that this sweater looks, especially in these photos where she has paired it with different outfits, dressing it up a little, dressing it down a little. I think that goes to show how versatile your knitwear really can be. I also had come across this really cute Elly Cardigan by Steffi Haberkern, which definitely embodies that Sezane cardigan just as wonderfully. Again, the only difference is the button band is ribbed here again instead of being that clean button band. So I wanted to show these as some options for you. I really liked the increasing or decreasing details on the sleeves here in case these were more your style. But for today's purposes, we're going to be referencing the Daydreamer Cardigan by Veronica Lindbergh. And another suggested yarn, I thought we could try going a little bit more budget friendly here. So she suggested a drops yarn, and I said, let's do it. Especially because, again, the color selections on this yarn are so abundant, just like the Sezane cardigan actually is. So for the sake of today's experiment, let's go ahead and pop in the pink color, just like the Sezane cardigan came in. This is a 50-gram ball for $5.75. It is 65% alpaca, 28% polyamide, and 7% wool. And with the Daydreamer cardigan as our reference to try and replicate the Emile cardigan, the average size would be about a size large, which requires about 1,120 meters of yarn or 8 balls of the drops air. And so the yarn total for this project would come in around $46. And versus that $170 price tag, definitely, you know, more than half the price or less than half the price of the original. And in this case, our content is so similar. They have 55% alpaca. We'd have 65% alpaca. They have 30% polyamide, we have 28% polyamide, and then they have 15% wool to our 7% wool. So super, super, super similar composition for literally less than half the price. And it kind of reminds me of the conclusion we came to on the Free People video, which was that a lot of times the more details there are in a knitwear piece that you could buy online, the more cost effective it would be to make it yourself, because obviously that bumps up the amount of time you'd be spending on it. So when it's a little bit more labor intensive, it does seem like you could save some more money by taking that extra time to make it yourself versus purchasing it. But at the end of the day, you get to say that you made it. So if that matters to you, then this is definitely a situation where I would want to make this cardigan versus purchasing the Sezane option. So coming out of those signature pieces, we're now going to move into some of the new ins. So these are going to be a little bit trendier, more of the recent drop. And I think that this first option totally epitomizes that. As we're coming into fall here, we have the Samuel Jumper. Such a classic shape sweater vest in this dark taupe. It's absolutely beautiful, kind of dark academia vibes, if you will. And this one does come in at a whopping $135. Now, it is made out of 43% baby alpaca, 29% merino wool, and 28% recycled polyamide. It's also made in Italy. And this is probably just that perfect sweater vest. It's a really lovely crew neck. It does look like these ribbed finishing details are maybe folded over, so they're a little bit kind of chunky on that ribbing on the collar as well as on the sleeves. I'll also note that this vest in particular, the way that the ribbing just falls off of the shoulder, I think the proportion is so perfect that's hard to nail in a vest. And I do think that oftentimes that's what separates a vest from looking just right on somebody, is the way that that shoulder kind of falls off the shoulder or doesn't, and just how oversized it is. It's a really, really tricky proportion, and I do feel like Sezane nailed it. Again, we have a plentiful color selection. I love the red once again. Let's look here at the mahogany version, because this is that really yummy, warm brown. And as you could probably see now, a lot of these sizes are out of stock, which is all the more reason to try and make it yourself. So let's see what we were able to find. To begin, I thought that this Maja Slipover by We Made Wardrobe was a really close find. It has that classic staple sweater vest look. I think the only things that were really difficult to find were a lot of sweater vests that had the folded over details and things like that. There are so many options out there, but this was one that I hadn't seen too many people speaking about. And I also thought it had some interesting little personality bits of its own, including the little stitch detail at the base of those ribbed finishes. So this just had that extra something that made it a little bit more special to me. And I also love the way that those increased details look around the armhole. So this is a really fun option if you like those little extra details. And then something that was just a little bit more basic and similar to the Sezane jumper is the Semper Slipover by the Knit Pearl Girl, which is once again the very classic sweater vest shape. It also has the folded collar, and I just wish that those armholes were also folded over, but of course that's always a really simple modification that you could make yourself. And I definitely think that this is one where you'd want to play around with getting the sizing just right if you like the fit of the Samuel jumper, where that armhole does just kind of slip off of the shoulder. That's just one of those things that when you're choosing your size, you're gonna have to make sure you get all of those little adjustments just right. But for this vest, as it is another one that is merino plus a soft silk mohair is the recommended yarn, and in this case, she does recommend the Knitting for Olive again, but I thought we could try and keep it particularly budget friendly by jumping over to some more Drops yarn. So in this case, I've gone for the Drops Merino Extra Fine. It's 100% wool, and the 50-gram ball would typically cost you about $4.20. However, as goes with all of the yarns I'm going to mention today, almost always you could find these things on sale. So I wouldn't purchase these things at full price unless you had to. Always look for a sale, a discount code, something like that, because you will be able to find it. But this just seems like a really lovely option that has all these different colorways. This chocolate feels kind of reminiscent of the Sezane version we were looking at. And then the Drops Kid Silk would be a really great option to hold alongside it. If you've never used Drops Kid Silk before, I have used it, and I've also played with some Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair. I've just started playing with some Rowan Kid Silk mohair. I've worked with the Sanisgarn Tin Silk mohair, and I would say that, I've also used the Ito soft silk mohair. I can't remember what exactly it's called, but I would definitely put the Knitting for Olive and the Ito as like the softest options. And after that, I would kind of say that Drops is pretty comparable to things like the Sanisgarn Tin Silk mohair, the Rowan Tin Silk mohair, Kid Silk mohair, sorry. And I've also used the Knit Picks Aloft, which I would rank higher up with the Knitting for Olive and the Ito, if you were curious. So for me, when it comes to a vest in particular, I would go for the more budget-friendly option because you're usually not wearing it next to skin. And since it's just a little bit more prickly than those more premium options, it's a great application to save some money. So in this case, we could look at this toffee colorway, which for a 25-gram ball, it's $5.95. And this is 75% mohair, 25% silk. The average size of the Semper Slipover is the size F, which would require about 1,000 meters of the merino and 900 meters of mohair, which is equivalent to about 10 balls of the merino, 5 balls of mohair. And that means that the yarn total would be about $71.75. So again, wonderful savings when you compare that to the Sezane Samuel jumper at $135. The next garment we're going to look at is definitely one of Sezane's more premium options, and that is this Theus jacket. It is an absolutely jaw-droppingly stunning cardigan jacket, and I'm a big fan of this. It does, however, come in at a little bit more of a premium price at $235. Now, the fabric here is absolutely beautiful. We're talking about 34% kid mohair, 34% wool, and then 27% recycled polyamide and 5% elastane. This one's actually made in China. But how gorgeous is this little jacket? It's got this fun little, almost funnel neck ribbed collar, which comes out of the incredibly wide ribbed button placket. And the length of this cardigan jacket is just that perfect sort of cropped but not cropped length. It really does seem to hit just at that point on the widest, right before the widest part of the hips, and I think it's a really beautiful, flattering cut. Now, my favorite option here is definitely the perfect green. I would call that the perfect green. Yes, I do agree. And I love the sort of marling that you seem to get from what I'm assuming is like the mohair versus the main yarn color. However, they also have a colorwork version of this jacket, and I just think that this is to die for. First of all, color combination gets a big ol' A+ from me. To mix the brown, the black, the white, keeps it graphic, keeps it modern, keeps it timeless. I'm a massive, massive fan of this. And so I was eager to find some good dupe options. Let's talk first about our plain green cardigan here. For that, I wanted to show you guys this Cardigan Seul by Mochi Knits. I'm a big fan of Mochi Knits. I've knit a pattern, only one pattern of hers before, but it's like changed my life. I loved her writing style. I thought it was thorough, detailed, just enough hand holding, very clear and concise, and the attention to detail that this designer has is hard to come by. So I have so much respect for Mochi Knits. I would 100% recommend her patterns to anyone who's interested of any skill level. And isn't this such a good dupe for the Sezane cardigan? So here we have the Cardigan Seul. It is very similar in that kind of boxy shape. It also has little pockets on the front, which the Sezane cardigan also has. The sort of ribbed funnel necky collar situation is another common theme that both of these sweaters share. And overall, I think that this shape style of jacket cardigan strikes the balance of like cabin comfort with just chic structure. So I love that. And then of course, Mochi Knits always adds in these little details like the little pleat on the sleeve. It's stunning to me. It also looks like a rather chunky knit, so you could probably knit this one up pretty quickly. In fact, you could probably knit this and still wear it this fall. So if you do, let me know. I'd love to see it. And then I figured I had to try and find something that could maybe replicate the colorwork version of the Theus jacket from Sezane, and check out this cardigan. I mean, do I even have to say anything? Saga Cardigan by Wench Roald. I'll also note here, I think that I had one of this designer's patterns in that Free People roundup. And again, it does say that the patterns are free. However, there won't be pattern support. So just take that information as you will. I saw this and literally was like, this is the Sezane cardigan. Imagine swapping out the red for brown, and then those already contrasting colors of what looks like a gray and then maybe like a burgundy, make that white and black, and you've got the Sezane cardigan. It's obviously missing some little details of, you know, like the standing collar and things like that, but I'm confident you could make those modifications. All you would need to do really would be to knit the collar that bit taller, as tall as you want it, and then knit that same length over again and fold it under and sew it down, and that would be all you would need to do to make this cardigan look like the Sezane Theus jacket. I just think this is so cozy, cabiny, chic, timeless style. I just think that this is the kind of cardigan that anyone from like a teenager up into their grandmother and beyond would want to wear, and you can include me in that bunch. This is stunning and I absolutely love it. So that is definitely an option. However, for the sake of comparison today, I did think it would just be easiest to go ahead and use the Cardigan Seul for our comparison, being that this design calls for a worsted weight yarn, and I was trying to get that look of the Theus jacket. I thought it would be a good opportunity to again use a merino and mohair combo, and in this case I thought that we could try the Knit Picks Swish DK. So this is Knit Picks is 100% fine superwash merino wool. I would love if it wasn't superwash, but that's what I could find on the Knit Picks website that would assist me in matching the gauge for the Cardigan Seul and then, you know, getting to hold it with a strand of mohair. So in this case, I am really trying to replicate the look of that perfect green Theus jacket. And so for the Swish DK, I thought it would be fun to do in their moss colorway and then hold it with a strand of the Aloft Super Kid mohair in the colorway Mountain Fern Heather, which I think would just give it that kind of halo and glow and little bit of marling that you did see in the Theus jacket. Now, the Swish DK would originally be $6.99 for a ball, whereas the Aloft Super Kid mohair would typically be about $13.99, but you really can always find a Knit Picks discount. The Aloft Kid mohair is 72% Super Kid mohair and 28% silk. Now, the average size of the Cardigan Seul is a size 4, which would require about 1,361 yards of worsted weight yarn, and I'm guesstimating that would translate to about 11 balls of the merino and 5 balls of the mohair, which means that the yarn to make this sweater would be about $146.84. And just to throw it in there, because you usually can find a 20% off discount code, with that it would be about $117.47 as compared to the Theus jacket, which comes in at $235 from Sezane. So this is probably one of those situations where that contradicts with my point of the more involved it looks, the more you could save by making it yourself. This is just a case of really great materials, really great fibers, probably a very densely knit garment for Sezane. It is worth it to make this one yourself, I would say. Next, we have the Claudio jumper from Sezane at $170. This one is 53% merino wool and 47% organic cotton, so a little bit more of a warm weather knit. And how cute is this sweater with the sailor collar that it has? So from the front, it's a V-neck with this kind of overlapping collar, and then from the back, it actually does hang off the back, which I think is a very fun kind of nautical, of course, sailor detail. And I thought it could be interesting to see if we could make something like this. So to do so, I came across the Timepiece Pullover by Albiona McLaughlin? And I mean, this is pretty darn close. Obviously, the most important detail of that Claudio jumper is the collar, and so that was really what I was looking for. And in this photo in particular, I think it's pretty clear that we found it. So this sweater does have options to knit it with the collar, knit it without, so it's a really versatile piece. However, if you knit it with this fun collar, then you're definitely going to be getting that Sezane look. And I bet it would also just be a really fun knit to try out a different construction like that. Now, to try and replicate the Sezane jumper, I wanted to find a yarn that was merino and cotton, just like that one was. So for this sweater, I have pulled. From Hobie's website, the BC Garn Bio Balance GOTS, GOTS, it's 55% wool and 45% cotton, which makes it a really great contender comparing it to the Sezane option. Each skein of this yarn is about $10. Now, the average size for the Timepiece Pullover is the size 5, which would require about 1,625 yards of this yarn, or 7 balls. And so you could knit this one for about $70, which is $100 less than the Sezane option. And then the last Sezane direct dupe I have pulled for us today is another really staple Sezane sweater that I've seen before putting this video together for you, and that's the Marie Cardigan, which is a lovely tie-up blousey cardigan. And I love the look of these sweaters, but I've never made one because I love how they look when they're just open like the model is wearing here, and I would never wear that. So if you, I mean, I think that they do look cute over like a plain white t-shirt, but otherwise I find them to be a little bit tricky in versatility. However, this one, they do make it a point of saying that you can wear it either front or back. So you could have those ties on the back or on the front, which I do think is a nice option. You could probably do a little day to night type look with this one, with the bows on the back during the day and then move those bows to the front for night. Now, this is a $160 cardigan, and it is made of 38% polyamide, 35% merino wool, 26% super kid mohair, 1% elastane, of which 20% of GRS certified recycled polyamide. So of the options we've talked about today, this one was definitely one of the higher synthetic material contents, and I just thought that was interesting to note. But how cute is this dupe, the Celeste Cardigan by Selena Deering? And so similar, right, with the two ties, just like the Sezane cardigan has. I really appreciate the little details here of the folded hem at the cuff, the little I-cord around the neck, the folded hem at the bottom of this sweater. It's just really nails the proportions and details, in my opinion, and I think is a really excellent dupe. Now, to try and get that look more of the Sezane cardigan, on which I see some halo from the mohair that one has, I thought it'd be fun again to try adding a little mohair to the mix with the Celeste cardigan. And we're running the gambit of all of the different options today, which means at some point we'd have to come talk about some Sandnes yarn. So for this cardigan, I thought it would be pretty fun to use something like the Sandnes Sunday. I really like this raspberry sorbet color. I think it kind of gets that pinky Sezane color across. And this 50-gram ball is about $12.20, and it is 100% merino wool. And I thought we could hold that with the Sandnes Tin Silk mohair, which is 57% mohair, 28% silk, and 15% wool. Again, I would probably go for something that gives just the littlest bit of heathering and variation, and either pushing that pink a little brighter with something like the pink lilac or the shocking pink, or kind of tone it down a little bit by using something like the light beige, and therefore you would get that kind of marling heathering effect that the original Marie cardigan has. The average size of the Celeste cardigan is their size large, which would require about 1,320 yards, or 6 balls of mohair and 5 balls of merino, which means that to knit this cardigan and try to match that content as closely as possible, but a little bit better than the Sezane version, it would be about $155.20 in yarn, which is right up there with Sezane's $160 price tag. But the synthetic materials are nowhere to be seen. So that's a pretty cool level up if you ask me. This was so overwhelming. Those were all of the patterns that I found that felt like I could really dupe the Sezane look for less. And what we learned here is I definitely think that Sezane's pricing is incredibly fair for the quality and the consideration that they're putting into their garments. But I do think that in this case, this brand is for the people who want that quality but wouldn't know how to make it themselves, because if you are a knitter, I definitely think that you could get these looks for less, or at least for around the same price and a better quality of material, though the Sezane options are way up there, especially when compared to their competitors. Now, just to round things out here, you may have noticed that none of the options I threw out there today were the lace options, or as Sezane calls them, their open work. And that's because these pieces are just so intricately detailed. It really is hard to find dupes that really live up to the Sezane originals. So I've just pulled a few options in case the lace is more your thing, but I won't be going over the yarn suggestions and prices here because I just couldn't find anything that was quite right. But these were some of my favorite lace or open work options from Sezane, starting with their Elise cardigan, which I would love to see someone design a pattern like this, where we have the really lovely little waist tie detail. It reminds me of a lot of the patterns that were coming out this summer in the form of tank tops, but this has just such a pretty dainty vibe to it. It's very feminine, very girly, with the scalloped edge detail. And I did notice Sezane does often utilize this crochet edging on their pieces, so that was something that was interesting to me as well. In fact, they also use a really similar kind of scalloped crochet edge on this Marty cardigan, which is $155. It's super similar with that little waist tie detail, the button up front, a little feminine V-neck, but this one definitely does provide the all over kind of eyelet floral lace. I love that look so much. It's so timeless to me. And this is just a really beautiful option that I thought was kind of similar. The closest things I could find to mimic these sorts of styles were, first of all, the Pride and Pearls cardigan by Veronica Lindbergh. Totally a different look in that there's no lace involved with this one. However, it does have that cardigan close up, and obviously the most similar thing about this is the cinching I-cord drawstring at the waist. That definitely does mimic the look of both of those Sezane cardigans. I'll say that after filming this video, I definitely think that I can tell Veronica Lindbergh is strongly inspired by Sezane's aesthetic. I also thought, like I said, those summer knits that we had seen popping up more and more this summer, this could definitely fall in line with one of those. And if you're maybe a little bit more ambitious and would want to try and modify this to add sleeves, you could definitely get close to those Sezane styles. So this is the Fleurie top by Friday Knits, and here we see those little eyelet floral details, of course the drawstring waist and the buttons going up the front. If this had sleeves, it would be our best bet at mimicking those styles from Sezane. But boy, is that a tricky task to do. If you know of a pattern more similar to those Sezane looks, please let me know, because I'd love to knit one. They're very pretty. We also have the Nathalia jumper, which is $150. And this is a really lovely wrap style top. Again, those crochet shell scalloped stitches on the edges of this neckline here. This rosewood color is honestly stunning, and especially on the different models here, it looks beautiful on both of them. But another kind of vintage looking pattern that has these really lovely romantic details of the lace and the shell stitch and the wrap style top. And I think I got a little bit closer with this one in the Ballerina Romance Sweater by Camille K. And she also has this wrap style top with scalloped details. It just isn't wrap on both sides. It has the high neck and then the wrap style, and I do believe you could wear this one either way. Yes, you can here. And I thought that the romantic sleeves were actually very similar to the Sezane jumper. So if you like that look, then this would probably be your best bet. But again, I'd love to hear from you guys what you have seen that looks more like the Nathalia jumper from Sezane. We also have the Angelo cardigan at $160. This one is just a little bit more toned down in that it's a lot of solid fabric, but then it has this like bib panel of lace and cables and buttons and shell stitches, and it's just so sweet, but it's very contained to the front, which I do think makes it a little bit more versatile, a little bit more of a broad spectrum for different styles. And for this one, I thought that the Amazonier Cardigans 2.0 was a pretty close match by Chandelles et Cardigans, where again we have the lace details really concentrated in the center of this top, and it even does have the shell crochet border. It's just way more like enlarged and dramatic on this option, and this is another designer that I think must have a gravitation towards the Sezane aesthetic, as we're going to mention another one of her designs. But first, let's take a peek at the Stacy jumper from Sezane, which is an all over pretty plain sweater, but it does just have these refined little shell stitch details that are so sweet. I did think about Lily Kate France's new pattern. I'll have to put it on the screen here. I think it's in testing right now, but it was kind of similar to me in being a solid sweater with just really lovely lace edges. But the one that I found that was the most similar to this was the Venise Sweater by, again, the Chandelles et Cardigans designer. You can definitely see the inspiration here of those shell stitches just poking out from the neckline of this otherwise really simple, solid sweater, giving it just a little bit more of a festive detail. In the red, this is like screaming Christmas to me, so I absolutely love that. And then last up here is the Varda cardigan, $145, and this looks like a sweater that I probably would have worn to Easter when I was 7, but like would still wear today. I would still wear again in another 30 years. So I think that that definitely speaks to the timeless quality of these Sezane pieces. But what I loved about this one is the linear motifs. So the lace motifs go straight across this cardigan and it breaks it up, which I always love that juxtaposition of a more graphic detail like those lines mixed with the really soft feminine touch of the lace. I would love to hear your suggestions for something like this. The closest I could find was this Tallulah texture cardigan by Famke Mippy, the label, who also has these lace and cables motifs stacked in graphic line chunks. I think this is really lovely and a really fun option that I think you could dress up or dress down, not to mention the fact it's probably a lot of fun to knit because you just have these little bite-sized chunks of different patterns and designs and stitch combinations. So I'm sure that that makes for a really engaging knit. And I think that just about does it for the Sezane. Can I make it for less? The answer is I'm going to go ahead and put a stamp of approval here. Yes, We can. You guys let me know your ideas. Were there any patterns that I mentioned that you could see yourself making, or any that you think better suit the Sezane references? Let me know what you think, and please let me know what brand you'd like to see me dive into next. With that, if you enjoyed this video, I would love it so much if you'd go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so that you'll be notified anytime I post a new video. However, you can usually expect a Saturday morning upload at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. With all that, a big ol' thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. All right, you guys, bye!